On October 6, 1981, former Egyptian President Anwar Sadat was addressing a military parade in Cairo to commemorate the 1973 Yom Kippur War, when suddenly a man in the crowd stood up and shouted, "Down with the peace treaty!" As onlookers turned to stare at the commotion, another man stood up and fired a few shots into the air. The crowd panicked as it became clear that the president had been hit. He would later die of his wounds. But who was responsible for his assassination and why? If you've ever wondered what really went down, here's the full story of the assassination of Anwar Sadat. Ruling Egypt since 1970, Sadat had a complicated relationship with his country's political elite and foreign leaders. In 1977, he shocked the Arab world when he signed a peace treaty with Israel, an act that led to him being branded a traitor by many in the region. Back home, he'd alienated the Islamists with his increasingly authoritarian rule, and they'd taken to the streets on several occasions to protest against him. In recent months, he'd also had a falling out with Saudi Arabia's King Khalid after he accused the monarch of abandoning the Palestinians. In fact, Khalid's half-brother and Sadat's close friend, Crown Prince Fahd, had recently become convinced that the Egyptian leader was planning to overthrow him and rule over all of Islam. So when Sadat headed out to the annual military parade on October, he had no idea that he was walking into a trap. As he took his place in the presidential stand, his mind was at ease. There were thousands of troops marching before him, a display of the military's impressive growth since the humiliating 1967 war with Israel. He watched as a flyover of fighter jets roared overhead, and a group of paratroopers descended onto the parade ground. And then it happened. A lone gunman opened fire. But while the official investigation pointed the finger at the Islamic group, there are those who believe that the 62-year-old president was targeted by foreign forces who benefited from his death. With Sadat lay dying, his widow Jahan watched over him and refused to believe that the shooter had acted alone. She suspected that foreign powers had orchestrated the attack. After all, Sadat had made powerful enemies during his 11 years in office. His peace deal with Israel made him a target of Islamic extremists. His human rights abuses made him unpopular among liberals and leftists. And then there were the countries who'd lost out when he rebuffed their attempts to influence Egyptian policy. So could one of these countries have engineered a coup against him? And if so, which one and why? One theory accuses the United States of killing Sadat to send a message to other countries in the region who were becoming increasingly friendly with the Soviet Union. It was true that Sadat had taken Egypt in a new direction, forging closer ties with the USSR and accepting $2 billion in aid. At the time, this was seen as a major blow to America's foreign policy interests. Did Washington order Sadat's assassination to send a warning to other U.S. allies like Iran and Saudi Arabia not to follow suit? Another theory focuses on Syria, which had fought alongside Egypt during the Six-Day and Yom Kippur Wars, but felt sidelined by Sadat's subsequent peace deal with Israel. Could the Syrian Secret Service have been behind the attack? Or perhaps it was a rogue operation carried out by a disgruntled officer. The problem with pointing the finger at foreign governments is that none of them had a clear motive for getting rid of Sadat. Sure, they may have wanted to send a message to Egypt not to align itself too closely with their rivals, but was assassination really the best way to do that? The motive for the attack doesn't really matter, though, because according to the official investigation, neither the CIA nor the Syrians had any involvement in Sadat's death. Instead, the blame was placed squarely on the shoulders of the Islamic group. They'd done the dirty work, but it wasn't clear if they'd acted alone. The question is, if it was a conspiracy, who else knew what was going on? Was the US aware of the plot, and did it turn a blind eye in order to get rid of Sadat? Or was it simply a case of a foreign government knowing more than it's letting on? The truth is, we may never know for sure. And therein lies the enduring legacy of the man they called the engineer. Sadat may be dead, but his impact is still felt today. His death paved the way for Egypt's modern political system, and its current leader, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, owes his rise to power to the chain of events that began on that fateful day in October. But that's a story for another day.